I'm Dick Thompson. I had the good fortune to drive at Le Mans. It was quite a thrill for me. Part of this was due to the fact that it was the first time a Corvette had been entered. That's what I drove, and that's what I'm still driving. Right after Sebring, in April, I was talking with Briggs Cunningham, and he suggested we take a Corvette over to Le Mans for practice day to see what it would do. Well, within that same week, we shipped the car over by air, checked it out on the track, and came back home. We found out what we wanted to know. It was feasible to enter the car. We figured it would have a good chance to make a good showing. As it turned out, we were right. The 3 Cunningham team Corvettes came over as part of Cunningham's personal baggage, 20 tons of it. The cars were then driven from Le Havre to Le Mans. Cunningham also entered a new experimental E-type Jaguar. The Camerata USA team entered a 4th Corvette, as well as 3 birdcage Maseratis. Fortunately, all the Corvettes arrived with very little damage. If you'd seen those stevedores at work, you wouldn't have taken any bets. Our foreign cars received a lot of attention from the French people. I guess they hadn't seen any Corvettes to speak of. And let me tell you, driving through some of those narrow streets was just about as hairy as a track at Le Mans. Good practice, though. At Papa Dion's garage in Le Mans, our mechanics worked over the cars, adjusted them, made last-minute changes. Brakes were adjusted and readjusted. With a heavy car like this, they're mighty important. Even the heads got spruced up between practice runs. As you know, good mechanics can just about make you or break you, especially in a 24-hour race. Actually, Le Mans is tougher on the cars than it is on drivers. Most Europeans didn't consider the Corvettes to be serious contenders. After all, this was the car's first entry, and they felt that the heavy weight was a decided disadvantage. But one thing they didn't count on was the power. A couple of days before the race, the teams take practice runs on the track. On race day, there'll be over 200,000 people in those stands. Some Porsches are awaiting their turn. That's a fast back-end MG, built especially for the race. Did real fine, too. That's Zora Duntov of Chevrolet, Lee Lilly of the Camerati team, and John Fitch. Fitch has probably driven more European races than any other American driver. The cars pull right out on the course here as compared to the United States practice of going up to the end of the pit lane before you come out. Each pit has its own man with a flag to bring them out on the track. The walls around the course are made up of wicker, backed up with about 10 feet of earth for crowd protection. Makes it kind of rugged if you foul up. My co-driver, Fred Windridge, lost a wheel in practice doing 150 down the straightaway. The car skidded a little, but he got it stopped okay. His story afterwards was that he saw a wheel in his mirror and said, "Uh-oh, some poor sucker lost a wheel." 2 seconds later, he found it was his. Our Corvettes are pretty well squared away by now. When I went over in April, we had a 3.7 rear axle ratio and got 6,200 RPM down the straight. Now, just before race time, we had it down to a 3.3 rear and still got 6,200. That picked up about 15 miles an hour on the straightaway for us. Pre-race inspection of the cars lasts almost a complete day at Le Mans. The officials make certain each car meets all rules and regulations. They look over the majority of the car's parts to see that no special equipment is being used. And they can be pretty hard to persuade, let me tell you. If they can't find an engine number on a part, they insist it should have a number, even if that part never had one in the first place. It's a trying time for the interpreters. It's hard to make the officials understand. The cars are weighed because Le Mans has a prize for the efficiency of a car. In other words, displacement versus weight. Naturally, the Corvette was the heaviest car entered. We had the biggest engine, too, 4.6 liters. We had a practice lap around the 8.3-mile course, 4:28, without pushing too hard. Our Corvettes were true production cars, with additions like roll bars, adjustable steering columns, non-reflecting instrument lights, etc. It was the only true production car in a race. The others were built specifically for Le Mans, or thinly disguised racing cars. You couldn't buy one from a dealer if you tried. This is Briggs Cunningham's new E-type Jaguar. Its first showing at Le Mans. It's somewhat similar to the D-type, but has quite a bit of change in the suspension. It has a 3-liter, 6-cylinder engine and a 4-speed gearbox, 300 horsepower at 6,400 RPM. I believe it turned in a 4-minute, 8-second lap in practice. This box checks the ground clearance. 4 inches is a minimum for the whole bottom of the car. This can be tough to achieve. This Jag had American colors since it was Cunningham's. The Ferraris, like that red one, went with 12 cylinders, 5-speed gearbox, an engine capable of hitting 7,400 RPM, and had a fast 4-minute, 1-second practice lap. Over in the background is one of the French DBs. These small cars were out to win the award given the car most efficient for its engine size. These events take place 4 or 5 days before the race. As you can see, there are thousands of people already there. It's a holiday week, something like Indianapolis. All the major accessory companies had stands and exhibits at Le Mans. There's a huge AC spark plug in the background. One of the oil companies had a fancy pavilion put up for the drivers, a place to shower, nap, and eat during the race. Blur and Garage Vert are sold weeks and months in advance. You buy a ticket, maybe in Paris or Marseille, and it gives you a reserved parking place. The cheapest admission ticket is about $6. This is the famous Dunlip Bridge over the track. It's a famous landmark here as well as other courses in Europe. There was an antique car parade, too. Quite a difference from the high-speed action to come. The morning of the race was really something. Well over 200,000 people milling around the course. These are the 3 Cunningham Corvettes coming on the track and lining up in the pit area. Camerati's Corvette was number 4. The different colored headlight covers were Briggs's idea to tell the cars apart. You couldn't read the numbers, but you could spot the colors at quite a distance. It worked out real well. The Corvettes were a main attraction during the whole race week. Sports car enthusiasts from all over the world gave them a real going over, especially the engine. As I mentioned before, not many people gave them much of a chance in the race. Everyone felt they were just too heavy to compete against the smaller cars. The Corvairs received much attention from the crowd, too. They were used as official cars. Before the race, officials sealed the gasoline caps as well as the oil and water caps with boxcar seals. They made sure you used their gasoline and not something more potent. Then at pit stops, they broke the seals, then put them back on when service was finished. One of the regulations at Le Mans prohibits adding water or oil more often than every 25 laps. If you've got an overheating car, that's a tough rule to live with. We got our last-minute instructions from the chief steward. Of course, we'd already had sessions covering rules and regulations, ground rules, etc., and all of us had studied the course, noted such things as braking points and shifting points. It takes a lot of preparation. Le Mans is a demanding circuit. Before we look at the course and see what it is. This is a true road course connecting various towns. It was selected, not built. It's probably the most varied course in the world with a combination of straightaways, high and low speed turns, a little bit of everything. It's quite an equalizer for the different types of cars. Some are faster, some stop better, some handle better. Le Mans tests every part of every car. There's a smooth surface, white lines bounding the course for night driving, and a nice 4-foot wall for those who make mistakes. Let's start here. We're coming past the pits and past the grandstands at approximately 140 miles an hour in a Corvette, up to 170 in the faster cars. The first turn we come into is the Dunlip Turn. The reason for that is the Dunlip Bridge that goes over that. This is an uphill climbing turn with the apex approximately here. We're down to about 125 miles an hour by the time we reach the top. It's one of the better turns for a Corvette. As we reach the top of the hill, we come down into the S's. This is a downhill, very difficult stop, perhaps the most difficult stop on the course. Approximately 70 miles an hour through the S's with a 4-foot wall again on each side of the course. We have a short straightaway under another bridge here. This is a pedestrian bridge into the Terterous Turn. We're down to about 40 to 50 miles an hour at this point. Very critical turn because it governs the speed you go down this long straightaway. This is the Mulsane Straight. Not quite as straight as it appears here on this diagrammatic map. Actually, about 3/4 of the way down, we have a gentle turn here that for the Corvette's not quite so much. You have to work a little bit hard, but for the faster cars, it's quite difficult. As we approach the end, we have a hump just before the end so that the actual braking area is invisible. You have to come over the hump and brake for a very slow turn here at the Mulsane Corner. We have our usual sandbank on the outside here. We do have an escape road at this point, which we don't have everywhere. This is about 25 miles an hour. Here we accelerate out. This corner doesn't have a particular turn name that I know of. We come down to Indianapolis Corner, so named because it's banked. It's the only banked turn on the course. We have another short straightaway, second gear through this area. Come up to Arnage Corner. There's an escape road that again is not on this map. This is again about a 25-mile-an-hour turn. We accelerate out of here, go over a small bridge, and come to White House Corner that is approximately halfway between the pits and Arnage Corner. White House is a rather high-speed turn, perhaps 125, 130 miles an hour, again bounded by the 4-foot-high walls. This brings us then back to the pits and around the straightaway, one full lap. So that's the course. Now let's look at the race. The sky was overcast and the stands were full. Probably 250,000 people around the course. There's John Fitch, Zora Duntov, and me just before the race started. At 3:59 p.m., we were in our little circles and the traditional complete silence had fallen upon the crowd. And then the flag dropped. The first car around was Camerati's Maserati, driven by Maston Gregory, after taking off 20 cars behind. After 1 hour, his average speed was over 121 miles per hour. Next came 3 Ferraris, driven by Von Trips, Mariessa, and Rodriguez. During that first hour, I had quite a battle with the Ferrari coupes. At 5:37 p.m., Von Trips and Scarfiati ran out of gas with their works Ferraris. 2 of Ferrari's cars out of the race before they ever made their first pit stop. You just don't expect that sort of thing from a professional outfit. This is Mulsane Corner at the end of the Mulsane Straight, over a 90-degree turn. More than one car used that escape road, I can tell you that. The Corvettes break down from 150 to 25. Quite a test of brakes. The Europeans forecast early brake failures for us, but we had no brake trouble on any of the 4 cars. As you can see, the drivers respect this turn. No sliding around here. They get slowed down for sure. This is the famed Arnage Corner, 2/3 of the way around the course. It's quite a slow turn, as you can tell, down to 25 or 30 miles per hour. Acceleration is extremely important at this point. After an hour or so of battling with the Porsches, I just walked off and left them. It was pretty unexpected. We were quite proud of that achievement. The Maseratis were far the fastest down the straightaway, 170 miles per hour. The Ferraris weren't quite as fast, but more durable and better designed for this race as it turned out. The Ferrari coupes were just about as fast as the sports cars, believe it or not. Their streamlined shape did it. Of course, the sports car would out-accelerate the coupes coming out of the slower turns because of its much lighter weight and increased horsepower. Our Corvettes were actually racing against the Ferrari coupes. On the straightaway, we were hitting over 150, surprisingly fast. We were the fourth fastest make in the race. That's pretty impressive for a Grand Touring car. The Ferrari coupe, however, was even faster down Mulsane and about 600 pounds lighter, so they would out-accelerate us out of the corners. One thing we did have on them was high-speed handling. We could go through the high-speed corners appreciably faster. This, combined with excellent brakes, kept us in contention. Here's a car pulling in for a first pit stop. When Gregory went in with his Maserati, a burned-out starter kept the car in for an hour. Chuck Day took over then, but their lead was lost. In fact, they were 11 laps behind, and the Ferraris were controlling the race. Camerati lost another Maserati when Munaran's car stopped on the course with a short circuit in the electrical system. This was our favorite turn, under the Dunlip Bridge. The Corvette did better here than on any other turn. It's a nice, long, fast turn. The faster the turn, the better the car likes it. We had a little more trouble on the shorter turns because of the weight. The S's. They were an interesting pair of turns, radical changes in camber. The signaling pits were located at the opposite end of the course from the regular pits, connected by telephone. They didn't want to expose the signalers to the high speeds past the grandstand. There's one of the first Maseratis to go out. Within 4 hours, all of them were out of the race. Gregory gave up with a blown-up engine, Jim Jeffords' gearbox went out, and that left Camerati with just one car, Lillian Gamble's Corvette number 4. At the end of 2 hours, our number 2 Corvette was only about 1 minute behind the Ferrari GT, and we were ahead of all the Porsches, 2 of the Maseratis, and all the Aston Martins. Camerati's car was moving up too, and things looked very good for us. The speed past the pits ran about 140 for the Corvettes, up to about 160 for the faster cars. Pulling out of the pits in this traffic was really something. Then about 6 p.m., the rains came and the track was flooded. Things really got rough out there. The Ferrari GT, driven by Blanton, crashed just after the Dunlip Bridge turn. The car was demolished, but Blanton was uninjured. A virtual wall of rain forced Kimberly's number 1 Corvette off the track at White House, and he flipped. Spilled gasoline, caught on fire, and burned the ignition wiring off the engine. If this hadn't happened, perhaps he could have made it back to the pits, and the car could have finished the race after a few repairs. But you can't repair a car on the course. It must get back to the pits. Not long after this, Windridge, traveling at 130 miles per hour, spun at the same treacherous White House section, bounced off the walls on both sides, and limped back to the pit area. Notice the sparks as the headlight wires hit the wet pavement. He was very fortunate to be able to get it back. It took about 2 hours to get it ready to race again. You can't race at Le Mans without proper lights. This is Terterous Corner, 25 or 30 miles an hour when it's dry, and it's down about 15 now. The oil and the rubber on the road mixed with the water made it just like ice. As it got darker, the course really got dangerous. Here's Corvette number 3 switching to special rain tires. The cars ran very well in the rain. Everyone was pleased. Our good windshield wipers helped a lot, too. Some of the open cars actually got water on the inside of their windshields. That plus water on the driver's goggles presented a real problem. The rain and the spray from the cars literally blinded you at times. John DeBian was driving his Ferrari beautifully. The fast car behind him was the little Abarth 850, driven by Condriel. He seemed to be going as fast on the wet track as he had on the dry. About this time, Trintignant, one of the favorites, retired his works Porsche after losing a valve. These were the hours that the Corvettes made their best showing. At the beginning of the storm, Fitch was in 13th place in Corvette number 3. He found the other drivers were having more trouble with the wet track than he was, so he started to push. The Corvette handled just about as well on the wet track as it had on the dry. He found himself in a real struggle with the Europeans, especially the Porsches. The other drivers could easily recognize his 4 headlamps, but he passed the Porsches and they never seriously contested the Corvette position again. He even passed the leading Ferrari driven by John DeBian. In just 4 hours, Fitch jumped from 13th to 7th place. Incredible for Le Mans. Meanwhile, Lee Lilly and Fred Gamble in Camerati's number 4 Corvette continued to pick up places. At the end of the first hour, they were 41st. By the end of the race, they were 10th. Our car, number 2, was steadily gaining also, but had lost too much time in the pits to seriously contend. At 4 a.m., the halfway point, 40 cars were left out of 55. The Ferraris were holding first, second, third, with the D-Type Jag in fourth, the Aston Martin fifth, and in sixth, Tavano's Ferrari GT. Fitch was in ninth with his Corvette, 2 Porsches in 10th and 11th, Camerati's Corvette in 16th, and 2 of the new Triumphs in 17th and 18th. Because of the rain, the 108-mile-per-hour average was quite a bit slower than 1959's 115.6 average at the halfway point.